Elias stepped out of the Uber before it even came to a full stop, the gravel crunching under his shoes like tiny sparks snapping beneath him. He didn't even thank the driver. His mind was running too fast, too loud. The sky above the countryside was pale blue, calm, quiet, the opposite of what churned inside him. He barely made it 3 steps toward the porch before the screen door swung open with its unmistakable creak, a sound that always made him feel like a kid again. But today it hit him like a punch of memory and guilt. His grandfather, Samuel, stood framed in the doorway, his silver brows lifted high. "Why did you take an Uber?" he asked, confusion plain in his voice. "Where's your SUV we gave you?" Those words landed like stones in Elias's stomach. He paused at the bottom of the porch steps, unable to meet the old man's eyes. Everyone in the family had chipped in to buy him that SUV 5 years ago. Something practical, reliable, meant to help him get back on his feet after losing his job. It was more than a car. It was trust, support, a symbol of how much they believed in him. And now it was gone. "Grandpa, it's not here anymore," he said finally, keeping his voice low. It was the kind of answer that said everything while explaining nothing. Samuel's frown deepened, not angry, not disappointed, just concerned, which somehow hurt Elias more than if the old man had yelled. "What do you mean, not here?" Samuel asked, stepping onto the porch, leaning on the railing like he needed its strength. "What happened, son?" Elias wished he could lie. He wished he could say the engine died or a tree fell on it. But the truth was sharp and freshly painful, and it sat on his tongue like a splinter he couldn't swallow. He forced a steady breath. "I'll tell you inside," he said. "It's a long story." Samuel nodded once, slow and thoughtful. He stepped aside and let Elias walk past him into the house. The living room smelled the same as always. Old pine cleaner, worn leather, and the faint scent of coffee grounds left in the pot too long. Elias felt the comfort of it for a split second, a tiny flicker of peace, before his thoughts began racing again. He sat on the couch, elbows on his knees, hands clasped so tightly his knuckles went white. His grandfather took the armchair across from him, waiting. Elias could feel Samuel's patience filling the room, giving him space but also urging him to speak. Elias opened his mouth, but the words felt heavy. He hadn't said the truth out loud since it happened. He had replayed it in his head 1,000 times, each time hoping the memory would twist into something better. But it never did. "It started last week," Elias began. His voice was steady, but inside he felt himself slipping back into that moment. "Mason came over, you know, cheerful, loud, acting like everything was great. He said he knew a mechanic who could check out the SUV for cheap. Said the car deserved some work since I've had it for years." Samuel's eyes narrowed slightly, not in judgment but in recognition of where this might be heading. Elias kept going faster now, like the words were trying to outrun his emotions. "I trusted him," Elias said. "Of course I did. He's my cousin. We grew up together. I handed him the keys. He told me he'd be back in a couple of hours. But those hours stretched into a day. Then 2. Then 3. Elias remembered the moment he realized something was wrong. He had texted Mason twice, then called. No answer. He left a voicemail. Another call. Nothing. When he drove past Mason's apartment, using a borrowed car, the lights were off, the place quiet. No sign of him. Panic had started as a whisper, then grew louder, until it filled every thought he had. When he finally tracked down the mechanic Mason claimed to know, the man shrugged and told Elias he had never heard of Mason at all. That was when the truth began to unfold. Elias found the SUV 2 days later, or rather, he found someone else driving it. A middle-aged man with sunglasses and a confused expression when Elias blocked his driveway and demanded to know where he got the car. I bought it, the man had said. Paid in full. Papers are legit. And they were. Mason had forged Elias's signature on the title transfer. By the time Elias left the man's driveway, he wasn't just angry, he was shaking. His own cousin had sold his car. Elias felt the heat rising again as he sat on the couch, in his grandfather's living room. He rubbed his hands together, trying to keep his voice even. He sold it, Grandpa. Sold it without even asking me. I didn't know until I found the guy who bought it. Samuel took in a sharp breath, the kind that said more than words ever could. Elias kept talking, each sentence coming out clipped, almost breathless. I called Mason again. 12 times. No answer. A few hours later, I finally got a text, one line. I'll fix it. That's it. And then he vanished. He could still see that text in his mind. It made him angrier every time he thought about it. I thought maybe something happened to him, Elias continued. So I looked into it. Turns out he's been in trouble. A lot of trouble. Debt, bad decisions, people he shouldn't have borrowed from. And to cover some of it, he sold my SUV, my car, the one all of you helped me get. The room went quiet. Samuel's hands rested on his knees, his gaze fixed on the floor. When he finally looked up, his eyes held a mix of sadness and something like quiet anger. Not the explosive kind, but the kind that came from seeing someone he loved being hurt. That car wasn't just a car, Samuel said softly. It was a gift, a step forward, a way to help you rebuild. I know, Elias said. And I lost it because I trusted the wrong person. But that wasn't the whole truth. The deeper truth was harder to admit. I feel stupid, Elias said, voice dropping. Stupid that I let him do this. Stupid that I didn't question anything. Stupid that I believed he cared enough not to betray me. The word betrayal tasted bitter. Samuel shook his head. You were kind. You were trusting. That's not stupidity. That's heart. Elias didn't respond. He stared at the coffee table instead, feeling the weight in his chest grow heavier. In the quiet house. Every small sound stood out. The ticking clock, the hum of the old refrigerator, the soft rustle of wind against the windows. It made the silence between them sharper. Almost tense. Samuel leaned forward, his voice calm but firm. There's more to this, isn't there? Elias nodded slowly. There was more. Not just the betrayal, but the part he hadn't said. The part that fueled every breath he'd taken since discovering the truth. I want to go after him, Elias admitted. I want him to see what he did. I want him to feel even a fraction of what I felt when I found out. He hated saying it, but it was the truth. The desire for revenge burned inside him, restless and hot, keeping him awake at night. Samuel studied him for a moment. And what exactly would you do if you found him? Elias didn't know the answer. Not yet. But he knew the feeling. It was a mix of anger, pain, and something else. A need for justice. Or maybe validation. A need to show Mason that he couldn't destroy someone and walk away quietly. That under that was fear. Fear that revenge might take him somewhere darker than he wanted to go. Elias stood suddenly, restless, pacing the living room. I trusted him, he said again. But this time the words spilled out fast, one after the other. He told me he'd take care of it. He smiled at me while lying straight to my face. And now I'm stuck cleaning up his mess. And he just hides. He stopped at the window, staring at the driveway where the SUV used to sit whenever he visited. There was only empty gravel now. I can't just let this go, Elias said. I can't pretend it didn't happen. Samuel rose slowly from his chair, moving with the steady confidence of a man who had lived through more storms than most. He placed a hand on Elias's shoulder, grounding him. "You don't have to pretend," the old man said. "But don't let anger decide everything. That kind of anger takes more than it gives." Elias didn't answer. He couldn't. His mind was pulling him in two directions. The part of him that wanted to make things right, and the part that wanted to make things even. As he stood there, staring out at the quiet yard, everything felt twisted. The betrayal was fresh, raw, and he couldn't stop replaying it. Mason laughing. Mason reassuring him. Mason disappearing. Mason selling the SUV as if it meant nothing. It was more than a stolen car. It was a stolen promise. And Elias wasn't sure he could forgive that. Not yet. Maybe not ever. The house felt smaller suddenly. Too quiet, too still. Elias stepped away from the window. He didn't know what he planned to do next, but he knew one thing for sure. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. ChatGPT said, Elias barely slept that night. He lay on the old twin bed in his childhood room, staring at the ceiling as moonlight stretched across the floorboards like pale ribbons. His thoughts moved too fast to catch, bouncing from anger to confusion to the deep sting of betrayal. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Mason's face, smiling, casual, pretending nothing was wrong while stealing something precious right out from under him. That image alone kept Elias awake until the early morning hours, and when he finally did drift off, the rest lasted less than an hour. He woke up feeling heavier than when he went to sleep. He went to the kitchen, dragging his feet across cold tiles. Samuel was already there, slow brewing coffee in the old metal pot he'd used for decades. The smell filled the room, warm and familiar, but it didn't settle Elias's nerves. Nothing could. "You're up early," Samuel said without turning. His voice was quiet, not pushing, just noticing. "Didn't sleep much," Elias replied, rubbing the back of his neck. He sat at the table, hands clasped tightly as if holding on to something that wanted to slip away. Samuel didn't speak until he set a mug in front of Elias. "Your mind's running fast," he said. "I can see it on you." Elias wrapped his hands around the mug. "I can't stop thinking about him," he said. The frustration in his voice was sharp. "I keep asking myself why he did it. Why he didn't just come to me. Why lie? Why steal? Why from me?" Samuel sat down across from him. "People make bad choices when they're scared," he said. "Fear can twist a person." Elias shook his head, fast, rejecting the idea. "He could have talked to me. He could have said something. Anything. But he didn't," Samuel replied slowly. "And now you're left holding the pieces." Elias looked down at his coffee, watching the steam rise and fade. "I want to make him feel what I'm feeling," he said, barely above a whisper. "I want him to know what it's like." Samuel didn't say anything, but his expression shifted. Not shocked, not angry, just understanding. As if he'd once felt something similar. Elias leaned back, letting the chair creak under him. The desire for revenge was a weight inside his chest, like a stone he couldn't spit out. It wasn't just anger. It was a need for fairness, for balance. Mason had taken from him, and some part of Elias wanted to take something back. Not a car, not money, but a piece of certainty Mason had shattered. The day went by in slow minutes and fast thoughts. Elias wandered the property, trying to quiet the noise in his mind. He walked past the rusted swing set where he and Mason used to play as kids. He walked past the old oak tree where they carved their initials during one long summer. Everywhere he went, a memory followed, a younger version of Mason laughing, teasing, pushing him in friendly ways. Those memories hurt most of all. And yet, the betrayal didn't erase them. It clashed with them, twisting everything into something confusing and painful. He found himself clenching his fists without realizing. His jaw hurt from grinding his teeth. Every time he pictured what Mason had done. Selling the SUV, forging the signature, disappearing. Something ignited inside him. By noon he couldn't stand pacing anymore. He went into the barn, hoping the quiet would help him breathe. Dust floated in the sunlight like slow-moving sparks. There was an old workbench there, covered with tools, small bits of history scattered in metal and wood. He sat on a stool and finally let himself speak to the empty air. "Why did you do this to me, Mason?" The barn didn't answer. An hour passed. Maybe 2. Elias lost track. He found himself imagining different ways to get revenge. Some were small, telling the family everything, letting the truth fall on Mason like a weight. Some were bigger, confronting him in public, making sure everyone saw the liar he had become. Some were even darker, the kind of thoughts you didn't say out loud, the kind you shook away before they went too far. Each idea rushed through his mind like a fast-moving current, but none of them brought relief. Revenge felt like a fire that only grew hotter no matter how much he fed it. He left the barn when the light started to soften. Samuel was sitting on the porch, whittling a small piece of wood. He didn't look up when Elias approached. He just kept carving slow, steady strokes. "Feels like you're in a storm," Samuel said, even without looking. Elias sank onto the steps beside him. "I don't know what to do," he said. "Every part of me is angry. But there's another part pulling me back, telling me not to do something I'll regret." Samuel nodded. "That's the fight inside you. One side wants justice. The other wants peace." "I don't think I know the difference anymore," Elias said. "I don't think I even know what I want. I just know I can't forget what he did." Samuel finally turned his head. His eyes were steady, gentle but full of truth. "Wanting him to understand your pain doesn't make you bad," he said. "But letting that desire guide your choices without thinking, that's where people get lost." Elias let those words settle. They felt true, but they didn't solve anything. "How do I make this right?" Elias asked. "That depends on what right means to you," Samuel replied. "Do you want to fix the damage? Or do you want to break something because you feel broken?" Elias didn't answer. He didn't know how. That night, Elias went through his phone again, scrolling through the old pictures. Him and Mason fishing, joking, making plans. In every photo, Mason looked confident, alive, full of charm. It felt strange, looking at those memories while knowing what he had done. But mixed with anger was something else. A flicker of worry. Mason hadn't just betrayed him. He seemed to be running from something bigger, something dangerous. Elias didn't know what kind of trouble his cousin had fallen into. He didn't know who Mason owed or how deep it went. He only knew that desperation could make people do things they never thought themselves capable of. Elias pressed his palms to his eyes. The conflict inside him grew heavier by the minute. Revenge felt like a path where each step pushed him farther from who he used to be. But doing nothing felt impossible. Mason had hurt him. Mason had lied. Mason had stolen from him. Letting that go felt like letting himself be walked over. He needed answers. Real answers. And there was only one person who could give them. The next morning, Elias made a decision. A sharp one. Fast. He grabbed his jacket, his phone, and the little bit of courage he had left, then headed for the door. "Where are you going?" Samuel called from the living room. "To find him," Elias said. Samuel stood slowly and met his eyes. There was no judgment in the old man's gaze, only caution. "And what will you do when you find him?" Elias took a breath. "I don't know," he admitted. "But I need to hear the truth from him. Even if the truth hurts." Samuel nodded once, offering both permission and warning. "Don't let anger speak louder than your heart." Elias stepped out into the cool morning air. His pulse was fast. His thoughts were sharp. The conflict inside him wasn't gone. It was louder than ever. But he knew he couldn't hide from it anymore. As he walked toward the road, he felt something shifting. He wasn't just going to confront Mason. He was going to confront the part of himself that wanted revenge, the part that wanted peace, and the part that didn't know which one he truly needed. Every step felt like a choice. Every breath felt like a question. And Elias knew the moment he found Mason, the real battle would begin, not with fists or shouting, but with the war inside his own heart. One side wanted justice. One side wanted payback. And somewhere between them, he hoped he would find the truth. But whatever happened next, he understood one thing clearly. This wasn't just about a stolen car anymore. It was about who he would become when he faced the person who broke his trust. And whether revenge would fix the pain, or deepen it. Elias found Mason on a grey, wind-stirred afternoon, the kind that felt like a warning. The abandoned community centre sat at the edge of town, its cracked windows and peeling paint giving it a lonely look. Elias didn't know why, but something inside him whispered that this was where Mason would be. Hiding in the shadows, avoiding the world, avoiding him. And when he rounded the corner and saw his cousin sitting on the back steps, hunched over with his head in his hands, it felt like the story was pulling him there. On purpose. Mason looked thinner than Elias remembered. His clothes were worn, his hair messy, and his face carried the kind of exhaustion you didn't get from a single bad night. When he lifted his head and saw Elias standing a few feet away, his eyes widened, not just in surprise, but in fear. "Elias?" Mason's voice cracked. What are you doing here?" Elias didn't move closer. He stayed where he was, arms tense at his sides. His heart pounded hard enough to shake his chest, but his voice came out steady. "I came to talk." Mason swallowed. He looked around like he expected someone else to appear. When no one did, he exhaled a shaky breath. "I was going to call you," he said. I didn't know how." "That's not an excuse," Elias said. "You disappeared. You sold my SUV. You forged my signature. And you didn't even bother to look me in the eyes and tell me what you were doing." Mason flinched at every word. Elias didn't raise his voice, didn't step forward, didn't threaten him. But the quiet truth in his tone hit harder than yelling ever could. "I know," Mason said softly. "I know I messed up. I know I hurt you." He rubbed his face with both hands, shaking his head. "I didn't want it to happen like this." Elias stared at him for a long moment. The furious thoughts he'd carried for days started rising again. The ideas of revenge, of exposing Mason, of making him feel the same pain. But seeing Mason like this, tired and broken, created a new kind of conflict inside him. Then why did you do it? Elias asked. Just tell me the truth. No lies. No excuses. Mason took a breath so deep it sounded painful. I owed money, he said quietly. More than I could pay. I kept trying to fix it. I took risks. I made promises I shouldn't have. And I thought if I could just buy time, maybe things would turn around. But why sell my car? Elias asked, anger flickering again. Why not come clean? Why not ask for help? Because I was ashamed, Mason said. His eyes filled with something raw, regret, guilt, fear, all mixed together. I didn't want you to see how much trouble I was in. I didn't want the family to see it either. I told myself I'd return the money fast and you'd never know. I told myself I was doing the smart thing. But the truth is, I panicked. And I hurt you in the process. Elias stood silently. He had imagined this moment many times. Mason begging, Mason lying again, Mason running. He never imagined Mason looking this defeated, this honest. It made the anger inside him twist in a new direction, not disappearing but changing shape. You could have talked to me, Elias said. You could have trusted me. I didn't want you to think I was a failure, Mason whispered. That's not what you should have worried about, Elias replied. You should have worried about what you were turning yourself into. The wind picked up, pushing loose leaves across the concrete. Mason lowered his gaze. I'm sorry, he said. I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't expect anything from you. I didn't know how else to survive. Elias took one slow step forward, then another. His heartbeat grew louder, his breathing tighter. This was the moment he had been walking towards since the day he found the SUV wasn't his anymore. The moment where he had to decide who he would become. He could destroy Mason's reputation. He could call the family and tell them everything. He could take this broken version of Mason and crush what was left of him. He could turn all his pain into punishment. Or he could choose something else. Elias stopped when he was only a few feet away. Mason looked up at him with a scared, uncertain expression, bracing himself for whatever came next. I wanted revenge, Elias admitted. I thought about it a lot. I pictured ways to hurt you the way you hurt me. I thought maybe that would make me feel whole again. Mason didn't speak. He didn't defend himself. He didn't run. He just waited, breathing shallow and slow. But now that I'm here, Elias continued, and now that I see you like this, I don't feel what I expected. What do you feel? Mason asked quietly. A mix of everything, Elias said. Anger, disappointment, sadness, but revenge? I don't know if I can do it. Not like this. Mason blinked fast, like he wasn't sure he deserved mercy. Elias looked at him with a calm he hadn't felt before. I'm not going to ruin your life, he said. But I'm not going to fix it for you either. You have to make this right. You have to pay back what you owe. And you have to come clean to the family. This doesn't disappear just because you say sorry. Mason nodded, tears gathering in his eyes. I will, he said. I swear I will. I know I don't deserve your trust anymore, but I'll do whatever I can to make it right. Elias held his gaze, searching for even a hint of deception. But all he saw was someone who had fallen too far and finally realized the cost. Good, Elias said, because this is your last chance. The words weren't shouted. They were firm, steady, final, the kind of line that didn't need volume to carry weight. Mason lowered his head again, shaking as he took in a deep breath. Thank you, he whispered. I won't waste this chance. Elias didn't answer right away. He took a step back, feeling the pull of everything inside him, the hurt, the anger, the tiny bit of hope, and the heavy exhaustion that came from carrying so many emotions for so long. When he finally spoke, his voice was quieter, almost tired. "I'll check in with you. I'll make sure you're doing what you promised. But after that, you're on your own." Mason nodded again, not pushing for anything more. Elias turned away first. Not in victory, not in escape, but in choice. A choice to let go of the revenge that had been eating at him. A choice to walk a path that felt uncertain, but cleaner, clearer, less poisoned by anger. With every step he took, the gravity of what he'd done settled over him. He hadn't forgiven Mason. Not fully. Maybe not even a little. Forgiveness would take time, if it ever came at all. But he had chosen not to let revenge shape him into someone he wouldn't recognize. He walked the long road back to his grandfather's house with the wind at his back and a faint ache in his chest. The ache of release, of facing truth, of choosing strength over destruction. His feet moved fast, but his mind moved faster, sorting through everything he had felt and everything he had said. When he reached the house, Samuel was waiting on the porch. He didn't stand or rush over. He just watched Elias approach with a calm, steady gaze. The gaze of someone who had been through enough storms to spot the difference between rage and clarity. "You did what you needed to do," Samuel said, his voice low. "I did," Elias replied softly. "But it didn't feel like I thought it would." "That's how real choices work," Samuel said. "They don't give you fireworks. They give you truth." Elias sat down beside him. The sun was dipping behind the trees, casting long shadows across the grass. The world felt quieter than before, not because the noise was gone, but because something inside him had shifted. "I didn't take revenge," Elias said. "Not the way I planned." "That's because revenge doesn't heal," Samuel replied. "It only spreads the pain around." Elias looked out at the fading light. He didn't feel triumphant. He didn't feel defeated. He felt human, conflicted, a little lighter, but still carrying the weight of what had happened. "I don't know if I made the right choice," he admitted. "You made a choice you can live with," Samuel said. "That matters more." Elias let those words